All right, we're back. Another Thursday. And, week to week it's difficult always to come up with topics, but you guys have had some really good questions. But tonight, what came to me was talk a little bit about form and a little bit about concentration as well. And it's just really based on things I see through the week, sometimes with patients or even in my own practice. And so there's martial arts and self-defense and fighting styles all over the world. What's special, if at all, about Chinese martial arts? Some in the more competitive styles don't have a lot of respect for Chinese martial arts. And in a lot of cases, they have good reason. Chinese martial arts goes back hundreds, if not thousands of years, as does really any civilization self-defense system. It goes into the military. But in times of peace, the techniques are passed down so people can protect themselves. So why did Chinese martial arts and how did Chinese martial arts develop so differently in many ways? Much of what you see in Japan originated in China. In fact, all the Asian countries. China was the central country, and it's just older. And so they took ideas back with them and they developed them and made them their own. But there's records that go back even to India where sequences were made, forms were made. And there's stories of Bodhidharma coming from India and teaching the Shaolin monks because he found them lazy and weak and falling asleep in their meditations. And so he decided to teach them martial arts. And one of the ways he would teach that is through sequences, or what was also known as forms. Now, the term forms could literally be a hand form, a foot form, a technique. But it also grew into a sequence of techniques. And in China, there are well over 300 different styles. So really, what's the difference from one to the other? You walk into a school, you have some interest, particularly Kung Fu. So you look for a school and there's over 300 styles that say we're doing Kung Fu. And that's because Kung Fu is not a style. I could say in one way, Kung Fu is a way of life. This is true. But more specifically, more accurately, my definition is simply achievement through consistent effort over time, which means it can apply to anything you become great at. Great doctor, great sculptor, painter, musician, gold medalist, things like that. It's like lifetime work to get to the top, to get to be the best, or as good as you can be. So how does one know if a style they're practicing is any good? And these are the kind of things that I feel very fortunate because of the teachers I've had, and that, especially with the Grandmaster Park, the principle-based practice. Principle-based practice means it gets beyond the physical form, and you get more to understand why. Why are you practicing? What are you trying to accomplish? How to practice properly. And we can, if we're really paying attention, judge ourselves. We can figure out through the education, through years of practice, how to improve. Of course, a teacher points the way to help you develop faster and give you the tools, what's passed down from generation to generation. But how do you know what the teacher's passing down is good or not good? So 300 different styles. And many of them are some very physical and some called more internal. So there's styles such as Taiji, Xingyi, Bagua, Liuho Bafa, to name a few that were the most known internal styles. And then internal meaning what? Well, for one thing, focus beyond the physical. But those forms, what's in the forms? So there are four main methods of attack. The Chinese martial arts need to cover them all, and you could sort of name a style that specializes in each of them. But in most Chinese styles, we have them all, and it's a matter of individual focus. So hand techniques, for example, all the different punches, ways to use the hands. Karate tends to be considered, and boxing too could be considered hand-focused martial art or fighting style. And then the foot, use of the feet, kicking. Taekwondo is probably best known for that, which came from Tang Sudo. And even the name Tang Sudo is the way of the Tang dynasty is China, even though it's a Korean martial art. And karate, interestingly enough, most know from Japan, but also Okinawa, and the original karate meant China hand. It was changed in Japan by a Funakoshi, who changed it to empty hand. So people like to break that link, but it's in the writings. Even Aikido, you're using Chinese characters to write that word. Ki being chi. So the hand, the foot, what else? Controlling techniques and wrestling techniques. And what's interesting with these four is they kind of match each other. Hand techniques can be controlled by distance with kicking. Wrestling techniques can get in away from hands and feet and take away punches and kicks. Someone tries to wrestle with you, controlling techniques known as china, seizing control. This is joint locking. And the art that became most famous for this is on the ground with jiu-jitsu, right? Particularly Brazilian jiu-jitsu. But this is derived from the Chinese china, just different wording, right? And then they specialized in it. And of course, anyone who takes ideas and then makes it their own and develops them and masters them, of course, they're going to make it more they're going to make it special because they become great at it. And that's another interesting thing about history, because if I've met, when I was in China, we went around interviewing great masters, and one of the lineages was so interesting because the master, the grand master, was such a famous fighter, and you look at him and he was just physically bigger and stronger than everybody else, and then he was rough in his attitude. So how much was it his martial art, and how much was it just his individual skills and attitude and build? Someone's bigger and stronger than everybody else, teaching someone half his size, a lot of those things aren't going to work very well. And in my opinion, Bagua kind of helps us realize that, recognize that, like, how can I specialize? What's best for me in the art? So punching, kicking, joint locking, and throwing or wrestling. And forms have both obvious techniques, and then they have the more secret techniques, meaning levels of application. So if I throw a punch, it's obviously throwing a punch, okay? You can see I'm punching something or someone. I have a target I'm punching. But sometimes that punch or that movement actually means something else. A punch can become a block, for example. A punch can become a fake to lead into something else, for example. And then there's levels. So think of stance 4, known as the empty shubu. Many martial arts call it also the cat stance, but that's not really what we call it. I remember a saying from Lu Shietian, we would say, he never saw a two-legged cat, so why you call it cat stance? But anyway, the front foot being light is an example of a hidden kick. If you can sit back on one leg, that foot is alive. That front foot is alive, so it's a hidden kick. So a form might show stance 4 and not the kick, but it's still a kick. You know, you may step in a straight line, but in application, you step on angles. So there's levels of a form. And then sometimes maybe you get to see a competition. And especially what came through more modern China, you know, from probably the 40s, 50s, when the communists took over and they were really trying to kill the martial arts. The wushu. Wushu became more like a gymnastics martial art, performance martial art. And this is where people look and they see something very fancy, very amazing, these amazing athletes, and they say, wow, that's an amazing form. Is it? Why so amazing? I mean, you can watch Dances with the Stars and watch amazing dancers. You know, the human body is capable of incredible things. Cirque du Soleil, if anybody's ever seen their shows, it's just amazing what the body can do. And so what makes it a great form? Just because it's so fancy and a great to perform? And I have to say no. There's a form I learned way back in the 80s, and in a tournament in Houston, also in the 80s, I ran into the family that created it. Her grandfather created the form I was doing. And there was a part where I stepped back into stance 1 that you guys know. It's known as also the mountain climbing stance or the bow and arrow, gongbu, or dengshanbu, depending which name. And she sees me step back into that stance, and she talks to me later saying, so in that section you were just taking it easy, right? You were being a little lazy or just loosening up, just walking through it. I said, no, that's how it's done. And she said, well, there's supposed to be a full split there. And I you know, to this day, like, why would I do a full split there if this is supposed to be a fighting form? Why would I want to step back into a split? Because that's more fancy. It shows athleticism. Is that the purpose of a form? And in my opinion, her family was a perfect example that over a couple of generations, they went from very traditional to very wushu-like. And they'd be offended if you said that. But it was just true, whether they like it or not. The way they were practicing was more for performance. They were losing the traditional, which was more for practical use. And so this is a big part or reason why the Chinese martial arts has been even laughed at in many respects. You know, the true martial artists aren't trying to have fancy forms. So then the question is, well, what is a good form? If it's not the fancy form, what is a good form? And one of the best answers that I've learned is that the better form covers more of what the body needs to do. Many different kinds of movements. You know, if you think about the warm-up exercises, for example, you guys know the warm-up, 13 exercises. And you loosen up the back, and then you move into the neck. So you're loosening up the neck, and there's many ways to loosen up the neck. If you have neck problems, it could be something you emphasize more. And then there's the twisting and bending, and there's straight forward and bending, and then there's also twisting, reaching for one leg, right? So each of those is not supposed to be the same. Those three are different. And it's also stretching down towards the leg, bringing your upper body down towards the leg. If you move into later in the set with the swinging kicks, I've watched many times people testing or just in class, just watching how your body is with flexibility, mobility, and it can be very different from bending towards the leg to bringing the leg up to you. And why is that? So the reason a person can lose or will lose a lot of flexibility when they try to do a swing kick, when they bring the leg up, is because that ability, or let me put it this way, muscles don't stretch very well. You can't force a muscle to stretch. All you can really do is teach it to relax. So bending down towards the leg, there's some support there. So it creates a little tension. Bringing the leg up to you, you don't have the support. You actually have some dynamic movement there to help you. And yet, in most cases, it's much worse. The reason is because your core has to stabilize you in order to release one of those limbs. So if you're swinging the leg, let's say I'm swinging my left leg, I have to be balanced and stable on the right leg. My body has to feel secure, or it's going to tighten the muscles on the left leg so you can't swing it very easily. So now, how is that any different than somebody trying to throw a punch without balance, without any root, without any setting? Everything has to have a center that you move from. And so a form moving from technique to technique to technique is teaching us how to be balanced and centered with various techniques. The form is not meant to be the end-all be-all. It's a group of techniques put together to develop coordination, concentration, and a familiarity with those techniques. But they're not used the way they're done in the sequence. The sequence also is kind of a story to pass down from generation to generation so these techniques don't get lost. So balanced and centered, when you're balanced and centered, then the body can be loose. And then the looseness can create the power. So the same for the kick. You can't expect to be able to get any sort of speed and power on your kick if you don't have good balance and root when you're on one leg. And that too would be in the form. So now, what's your problem? You learn a form, you learn a sequence, you learn a series of exercises. Do you just go through it to remember? Oh, I remember. Shifu, I'm ready to test. We always said it was very bad etiquette to tell your teacher you're ready to test. And the simple reason is the teacher has to decide if you have developed what's necessary for the next level. The test and any kind of rank is secondary. It should be something that you basically just step right through when the time comes. And just make sure that that foundation at that level is secure so you can build upon it. And one of the most advanced abilities that we develop in movement is centered, balanced, structurally sound, and loose. There's a looseness which allows for speed, which can also allow for power. Power can come from speed, power can come from structure. It's kind of like a whip and getting hit by a truck. Two different kinds of power, but yet both can hurt, obviously. So within the form, what is it you're working on? And do you know? So the reason this topic came to me was because I run into a lot of people who have focus issues. Now there are organs to balance, to get better function out of, to help with focus. I mean, in Chinese medicine, it's the heart. The heart houses the shen being the mind. So yeah, people can have issues with different organs in the body causing the issues they have, the problems they have, the challenges they have. But how can we, and why don't they have good focus? How can we improve our focus and concentration, and how come so many people have such a problem with it? Why is meditation the hardest thing we do? Same question. So in meditation, still the body, to still the mind. But it's very difficult for someone to sit still for very long. Watch people, you'll see. There's always something shifting. So sitting still is a discipline. Getting out of this meditation is too hard is the only way to ever develop your mind. To be able to quiet the mind, to be able to control your emotions. Control them by not holding them back, but by letting them go. Because the mind recognizes the root of the problem and can release it because you're in control. If you can't control your mind, you can't control anything. So sitting still develops the concentration. Moving forms require concentration, or you can't possibly do them right. The form requires stepping. The steps many times are the various stances, and throughout the 300 plus styles of Chinese martial arts, they pretty much all have those 7 basic stances. Those are standard for Kung Fu, for Chinese martial arts. And then they may have a couple of specialty stances specific to their style. But the stance comes first, right? You stand in the stance stationary, then there's moving, then jumping, right? And then they can become mixed within a form. So how do you practice a form properly? And how does it help your concentration? Well, one thing I can concentrate on is my stances. How I'm stepping. Do I stay centered and balanced? Do I bob up and down if I step? Or can I walk smoothly? Do I stumble into my step? Or do I walk lightly? If I jump, do I make a loud sound on the floor, on the ground? And do I feel the shock through my body? Or can I jump and land more like a cat? Which in my opinion is why they had that name, the cat stance. It more had to do with an attitude of developing lightness. Like a cat. Not looking like a cat, moving like a cat. Light and quick and agile. So that alone is a lot. I remember going back to my long fist days in the 80s. It seemed every time I'd learn a new sequence, I would learn new muscles in my body. New things would hurt. And when I go back before that, in the sports I played as a kid in high school, I had a lot of ankle problems. And I remember learning the long fist, and the ankles, man, they would be ripped. They felt like they were getting ripped up. And what was really happening is it's like they were getting ripped up so they could be rebuilt. And so that can happen anywhere in your body. Problems you have can be corrected, can be fixed, but only if you move correctly. If you move incorrectly, there's a good chance you're going to hurt yourself. And then I think of the fancy flying forms versus something that may be done slowly. Tai Chi comes to mind, or Qigong, Bagua Qigong, same basic idea. Still using stances. Both ends of the spectrum, still using stances. Which one's going to help you get those stances right? Which one's going to help you move right? Fast or slow? See, when you go fast, you don't feel much. You just go. And, it's a lot of coordination. involved, but try walking slow and not losing balance. You shift off of one leg and stand on the other, and then try to step through without losing balance, without falling to the front foot. This is not easy. So still talking about just the stances, that's something you can focus on right there. And so now you're learning how to move through various techniques, and your focus could be just on your stepping, just on your stances, just on your root, just on your stability, your ability to feel centered. Another way to focus. Let's say the stances are pretty well set, or you just want to try something different. You do your stances focus one time, then maybe another day. The whole focus is on hand techniques. Is it a punch? Is it a block? Whatever it is you're doing, can I make power? Does my body move my hand? Does my body connect to my hand? Because if we're saying we're working on the technique of the hands, you cannot discount the body. And as soon as you move the body, do you lose balance? Just the last couple of weeks, we were introducing in the long fist a partner set. And a partner set, again, is not fighting. It's just teaching aspects of combat. And for some of them, it was the very first time they really were doing a form with somebody trying to block them. And of course, they lose balance right away, because you throw a punch and you think you're just going to hold yourself like a statue, and then suddenly somebody comes along and knocks your fist to the side. Now you topple over, you lose balance. So now you're not balanced and centered, are you? You're not supposed to move like a statue. So hand techniques, attacking and defending. And what's another technique? Well, the kicking. We already mentioned earlier the joint locking and the throwing, but usually they're a little more hidden and a little more advanced, so you don't really know where they may be, but you got the punches and the blocks and the kicks. And you can do a whole sequence just trying to make every one of those good. Every one of those good. And sometimes there's a part that's just uncomfortable. Don't just go through it and continue because you don't like that part. Take more time with that part. See, that is the education. What do I need? You have to ask yourself that. What do I need? And any part that gives you trouble, take that part out and do it over and over and over until it becomes a strength. And if that becomes a strength, you're not the same person anymore that you were before that was struggling with that part. And that's something that may be hard to imagine if you haven't experienced it. But that's how we're bettering ourselves, bettering our skills, developing our practice. Beyond the sequence with the stance and the techniques is also intention. So if I'm throwing a punch, where am I throwing a punch? I need a target. An interesting intention that comes out of things like Tai Chi or the Bagua Qigong is if I'm striking out slowly, many times with the open hand. Some say, imagine you're pushing away a mountain. You could bring it closer to home and say you're pushing a car. What kind of leverage would you need to push a car? You can't push it with just your arm. You literally have to wedge from the ground through your body into your hands. Now, of course, the car's pretty heavy. You can't imagine one hand. You'd use two hands, but the concept is the same. The foot through the body to the hand. All three coming together. to make it work. This is no different than throwing a punch. The foot, the body, and the hand come together to make power in the punch. Also, leverage in defense. Position in defense to protect yourself. So same sort of thing as in the form, built into the form. If you're practicing with focus. Without focus, you could be dancing, which can be beautiful, but it's not martial arts. What else might be in there if you're practicing a form? So one thing about forms could be the mixed stuff, right? But also I told you a form can be one thing, one technique. And in Bagua we learn Zhang. Zhang is something that goes into a lot of advanced practice. So it's a main characteristic of Bagua, our style. So Zhang, like punching or palm striking, has one hand and then the other hand. It's left, right, right? Notice my shoulders. Moving the hands. Stationary doesn't involve the legs much, just stability. And the body and the hand connect, become one. But just straight. So there's just turning. You end up about 45 degrees with one hand forward. Then completely 90 degrees to the other side for the other hand forward. You're also learning to close the door, protect yourself, get behind your hand, so that becomes a habit. But I'm thinking right now about the movement itself. What's different from straight to circle? The body twisting. So this is something you don't find in a lot of martial arts. Within the combat training to develop the body, there is also the Qigong training to develop the body for combat and for health. Any form is good exercise. What's a better one and a worse one? Which one's better exercise? Which one exercises more parts of the body? Bagua graduates this bit. One of my senior students way back when the Blue Dragon first opened, and he was learning the Bagua, and he said to me that Bagua Qigong was like Tai Chi on steroids. And I love that because it's very true. The power, the feeling, the Qi circulation is much greater, in my opinion, in my experience with Bagua. And one of the reasons is simply because of that twisting. So the way this was learned was a straight, not much different than throwing punches. But when you circle and twist behind you, every joint is twisting all the way up. And when you twist, it's like when you squeeze your hand, you get white knuckles, and then you release, and the blood fills in. So you're twisting very much like a wet towel, wringing it out. The better you get at it, remember, you can't stretch a muscle. A muscle has to relax in order to reach its range. So the better you get at practicing circle Zhang, twisting side to side, trying to bring the hand all the way behind you, the better you get at that, the more your whole center line can relax and release and wring out all the muscles of your core, all the muscles through your spine, all the way up to your neck. And then what? You change direction. It's a yin and yang. Extreme of yin becomes yang. Extreme of yang becomes yin. You throw a ball up in the air. Eventually, extreme yang, you threw it up, it's going to release and reverse. The power is released, it's done, it comes back. You can only go so far twisting Now everything is like the white knuckles through the body, naturally by twisting, creating the tension by twisting, and then release. And then the blood flows all through, enhancing your central nervous system and all organs. What's a good form? Well, what do you need? If you learn circle Fanjang and you're stopping on the side over here somewhere, you can only go half or 3/4. Well, your body can use more circle Fanjang in order to reach deeper parts of the body. Your life is in your torso. It's in your center. Central nervous system, brain and body communicating, all has to be loose. If you've ever gone to a chiropractor's office and they sometimes have a chart with the spine in the middle of the picture and it points to all the organs and parts of the body that every nerve comes out and innervates in the body. So if you have a blockage or you know the saying like a pinched nerve, which is not really a good description, but yeah, muscles can grab hold. That's true. It's kind of pinching it. Any nerve coming out of the spine where the tension is too great, the signal can be blocked. And it's not a light switch. This is the biggest mistake, in my opinion, in a lot of medicine. You're either healthy or not. You know, it's like your heart's fine until you have a heart attack. In a lot of cases that I've seen. You know, you have to be bad in order to be treated. But it's not a light switch, it's a dimmer. If you're supposed to have 100% energy flow, brain signal to a component of your body, let's say it's your liver, and you only have 80%, 70%, 50%, the liver's not going to work well. Let's give a different example. Let's say there is only 70% going to your shoulder, and then you're trying to exercise. Do you think if 70% of the 100% that's necessary to run your shoulder, you think if it's only 70% that you have a better chance of getting hurt? Yeah, of course. Because your brain can't turn that muscle on properly. So it's weaker, more likely to get injured. And in my experience, I brought this up many times, I've never actually seen carpal tunnel. I've seen the result of neck and shoulder tension destroying that area of the body because the signal was so weak over many years. But every time I've treated it, I treat the neck and the shoulder, and this starts to clear up. Because if you bring blood flow, you bring oxygen, you bring nutrients to those tissues, you are not a car. You did not rot away with rust. Your body's alive. Bring blood flow there. It can heal in many cases. And I would say nearly all cases. It's just that how long is the degeneration, the breakdown, the damage? How long have you had it? And how long would it take to reverse it? If it's down to the bones, big bony changes in your joints from arthritis for many years, it would take a long time to change that back. And don't forget, every time you move that joint, you're probably causing inflammation, which is probably causing more bone growth. So you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, literally in those joints. So sure, theoretically it can all be reversed, but the situation has to be perfect in order for that to happen. Best medicine is always prevention, which is why built into this martial art is things like that. Twist and release to improve circulation. Twist and release. If you increase circulation, make your central nervous system work better, your whole body is working better. Everything gets what it's supposed to get. Oxygen, nutrients, the bioenergy, nerve signals. The lymphatic system will drain. So your body's not a big garbage dump. Your body can clear all these poisons and toxins, and it can stay healthy regardless of the environment. That's been my experience. So what's a good form? Straight Fanzhong versus circle Fanzhong. The circle Fanzhong is getting down into the central nervous system. Well, what about when you go up over your head towards the sky, and we call it Tian Fanzhong? And you go up and over here. Well, Tian Fanzhong still has the twisting, but the arms move up and down now. So your shoulder is going to get much more exercise. Spine's still getting the same exercise, although it's not as direct horizontally. There's also a little bit of this now. A little bit this way, right? A little bit this way. Not just straight back and forth. Now you're adding some tilting. The heart and lungs naturally get more blood flow by the opening and closing of the chest, by going up and down and all the way behind you. So the ends are the same as circle Fanzhong, but how you get there is different. So now more parts of the body are involved. Again, better exercise. But is it better for everyone? What if you have a bad back? No. Straight could start to loosen you, and circle can start to loosen you further as you get warmer. Tian might cause a problem. It depends on the person, depends on the situation. But we have to recognize this. So for a healthy body, yeah, there's more involved, and it's going to bring more circulation through the body. It's going to affect the body more. When you move the torso, opening, closing it, twisting it, you are literally, I already talked about the spine, but the organs actually get massaged naturally. Glands creating hormones get squeezed and released. This stimulation to parts of the body, lymph nodes get squeezed and released, clearing poisons, clearing toxins. So the whole body is working better because of the exercise you're doing mindfully. Now, what is mindfully? So this goes back to the beginning. The first idea I had here was to talk about concentration. And then that sort of moved into forms because, well, what a great place to focus, right? What a great place to concentrate. If you can concentrate on the parts of your form, well, you're getting better at concentration. You're developing that muscle, so to speak. But now you're focusing on specifics of a form. Maybe repeating something just that your body needs. So there's practice just going through it. Okay, I'm going to do 4 straight Fanzhong, 4 circle Fanzhong, 4 Tian Fanzhong. And a lot of times we like to go from simple to the most complex and then back, so the body can relax more. So after Tian Fanzhong, you go circle Fanzhong, then you go straight Fanzhong. So is your focus on the counting, or is your focus on the feeling? Those who learn to focus on the feeling are going to develop much faster. Those who focus on following their body's feeling and learning how, let's say, circle Fanzhong, twisting back and forth, right? But when you go left, you don't go as far as you can go right, or vice versa. Could you stay there a moment, take a breath, try to relax more, and then go further to release that side more? If you're paying attention, yes. If you're not paying attention, you don't even care, because 1, 2, 3, you're just counting because you want to get done so you can go watch your TV show. And that's not Kung Fu. And I want that to hit home. Because one thing Grandmaster Park would always say is 20 minutes with focus is better than 2 hours without. You can be very efficient and effective through efficiency with your practice and your busy schedule. You can get a lot done in a short time rather than just wasting time and going through the stuff to remember. This art is very powerful, very sophisticated, and the rewards are sometimes hard to believe, actually. It'll fix many, many things in your body, but only when done properly. You just go through the motions? Nope, not much change. You know, I think of somebody with a back problem. What exactly should be the posture to help the back? And then here's a big question. Something a teacher said to me long ago was, my body will change. My body shape will change. My posture will change. He just said, and I didn't really understand at the time. I said, what do you mean it'll change? You know, I stand pretty straight. I'm thinking my posture was good. But as I practiced mindfully over the years, it clicked. There's a point when the body actually changes and it becomes very, very strong because it's structurally strong. You know, it's one thing to be muscularly strong, and it's very different to be structurally strong. Structurally strong is through alignments and the body coordinating, like your muscular system working with your skeletal system, and your ability to center with it, use it functionally in the action. And those who don't move properly, I literally at this point, I can go into a room and I can see who has a bad back without ever seeing you move. I just look at your posture and I know if you have a bad back. And if you don't have a bad back, and I think you do, and it's just a matter of time before you have that problem. Why is that? It's something I teach instructors. You have to be able to put your body into theirs to feel what they're doing right or wrong. If I do it the way you do, what is that going to feel like to me? If I haven't trained myself properly and deeply and really understand what I'm doing, I can't put myself in your body and feel it. But if I did practice properly, then I can. And this is what it takes to help others, which is why it's required for an instructor to have that kind of empathic ability in teaching. Not just the compassion or being nice, I'm talking about feeling the other person's feeling. It doesn't have to be emotional only, it can be kinesthetic. I look at your body and I know what that's going to feel like, and I know where the problem's going to be if I move that way. And so that has to be corrected if it's going to lead to a back problem, because try to do much of anything with a back problem doesn't go too well. So to once again bring it back around, within the form you have total concentration if you're practicing right. The exercise, the breathing, the circulation, the energy development, right? Feeling energetic when you finish versus exhausted is two different ways to practice. This is mindful practice. And if you practice mindful, you cannot help but develop the mind. Let's go to meditation.